I think we're gonna go ahead and get started now. Welcome everybody to the Intro to Git and GitHub workshop. We mentioned that downloading Git and making a GitHub account is completely optional because we designed this to be more of like a sit and like watch kind of lesson. We just want you all to be familiar with like the fundamentals of Git and what it's capable of, because we think that like learning that is kind of the most important thing, because once you know that, then all you really need to do is just memorize the commands, and those commands are always just like one Google search away. You know, just as long as you understand like what Git is capable of and like the kind of the workflow of how to use Git, then that's probably the most important thing. And not to mention, configuring Git and GitHub initially can be a little bit, it's not hard, but like it can be a little bit confusing, especially for new people. So we thought that having everybody try and do that might have been a bit too time consuming. So that's why we went forward with like more of this kind of style for Git. And yeah, and this might be a more shorter workshop. It's most likely going to be ending early. And if we have a lot of time afterwards, and you guys like really wanted to get Git set up in your own device, then we might be able to help you with that with our time we have afterwards. And with all that said, I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
So first off, what is Git? So Git is a version control system. Basically, it'll help you keep track of your changes to the code that you make on your project throughout your development process. And a really nice thing about Git is that it enables collaboration with other people, because when you upload your changes onto GitHub, it'll be like on the website, so on the cloud. So your project most recent version will have all of your most recent changes. And Git is an industry standard, and it's widely used today. And then once you install Git, the Git commands can be accessed through your command line interface, such as your terminal, PowerShell, and then the terminal that comes with Git called Git Bash.
And something to note, if you're a little bit like confused or like don't fully understand what exactly your version control system is, like a quick analogy is like if you go onto Google Docs or like Google Slides and you click like this symbol, you can see like all the version history and all the edits you've done on like your Docker slides, right? Git pretty much serves the same sort of purpose, but with like your code, you know, your whole project, or in this case, like your game project, you know. So it's kind of similar to this, but Git is a lot more powerful than just this. You can do a lot more with Git. And yeah, that was just a quick analogy I wanted to mention.
And so, how do you get started? So first, you need to understand the basics and the fundamentals of some of the basic Git commands like pushing and pulling, which we'll dive more into throughout the workshop. And Git is going to be one of the most convenient ways for you to document and keep track of your game projects and your development. Let's say something goes wrong, you add a change that like breaks your game. With Git, you're able to go back to the version of the game that still works before you made those changes that broke it, which is very powerful. And again, it's going to allow you to collaborate, because if your project is on the cloud, you can always download the latest version of your project. And so some key terms that have to do with Git, the main ones, first is repository. A repository is basically like your project as a whole. It'll have all of your project files. Think of it like the main folder of your game. It'll have like all of your assets, all of your code for your mechanics and etc. And then the second term is called staging. So when you work with Git, in order to document changes, you need to put them on something called a stage, which is something we'll get into later in the workshop. And in order to like commit those changes, they need to be on the stage first. There's going to be a diagram that'll help illustrate this more in the next couple slides. The next part is called commit. So a commit is just basically like a snapshot of your repository's stage changes. So when you add a file or multiple files to the stage, you're going to need to do this thing called committing, where it's kind of like it's a little hard to explain, but it's like a snapshot of your code in that current moment with the current changes that you've made, and then you can also attach a message to help denote the changes that are made in that specific snapshot.
Yeah, you could also think of commits as like a save, like when you save like a Google Doc or something like that. Committing, it's kind of the same thing. You're just saving like the current state, the current changes you've made on your document, or like your code, you know.
And then the next term is called pushing. So when you push in Git, you're going to upload the code and the changes that you've made to that code up to from your local repository to the remote repository. So your local repository is like the code that's on your computer. But on your remote repository, it's the code that's uploaded onto like GitHub or another repository hosting website. And so when you pull, you're taking the remote repository on GitHub and you're getting that version and you're putting it on your local computer, because your local and the remote will be different if you're not completely up to date. And then the next thing is called branching. This is gonna be a little hard to wrap your head around at first, but basically it's going to be a pointer to a specific commit. So we'll have a diagram to also help illustrate this later, but branches are like different versions of your project that branch out from like the main working version. I know it's gonna be a little confusing at first, but it'll make more sense as we go along and explain and also demonstrate it to you.
Yeah, we know we just threw like a bunch of words at you and you probably don't fully get them, but we're gonna put them into action and see like what we mean by all this. And so yeah, next thing, what is GitHub? I'm sure you've heard that term being thrown around a lot. And first thing to note, Git and GitHub are not the same thing. They're completely different things. They just go hand in hand with each other, but they are not the same thing. So just make sure you note that. Git is like a tool, and then while GitHub is more like it hosts the code that you have with Git, you know. GitHub is a website that you use to host your Git repositories in the cloud. And what that means is it's just a website where you can save all your code and files, your project files and all that. And it saves all of your commit history too that you did with Git. And so you've heard that we explained the term local repository and remote repository. You could pretty much just think of the local repository as the folder on your computer. Oh, I just spat. The folder on your computer that just has all your project files, like your entire game project or like all your code. That's what the local repository is. It's kind of just that folder. And the remote repository, you can think that's where GitHub comes in. GitHub is the remote repository. You can create a remote repository on GitHub and pretty much just like push all your game project files that you have locally onto the website to save it on there. And yeah. And GitHub is gonna be like the method, your main method of enabling collaboration to work with other people remotely. Because once you push all your local files onto GitHub, other people are able to go onto GitHub and see all those files that you put, and they could collaborate onto it as well. And yeah, it's a really powerful tool. It's kind of, I think, the main tool that programmers use to enable collaboration with everybody. I know there's different version control systems out there, but I would say that Git and GitHub is probably like by far the most popular one. And I can't say this for certain because I've never really worked in a company, but I think it's safe to say that if you're going to be working as any kind of like programming job at a company, Git and GitHub is going to be like the tool that you're going to be using for version control most likely. And it could be a really good skill, and it's a really important skill to get familiar with if you're like a programmer. Okay, so with all that out of the way, we told you what Git is, and we told you what GitHub is. Now we're gonna take you through the steps that it takes to start using Git, and also like push it onto GitHub and all that. There's a certain like workflow or routine that you do, like every time you want to make a save on or commit on Git, and every time you want to push it onto GitHub, there's like a routine that you kind of have to follow, and that's what we have outlined here. So first, let's say you have a folder with like all your game files or like code. So how do you start using Git on it? you first need to tell Git that you want to use that as a local repository. So that's what initializing the Git repository is. And you only have to do that once. Once you did that, that folder's already initialized. You don't have to repeat that step. But after that, you initialize it. So what's next? Let's say you made a bunch of changes to your project, like you added all your code or all your game features or whatever, and now you need to save those changes. So that first, like what Rob mentioned, you need to add it to the staging environment to tell Git which files you want to save. Because you could like select like specific files that you want to save. It doesn't have to be everything. So you put it all into the staging environment, and that is the environment where you can then commit or save those files. So you always have to stage your files before you can actually commit it. Like an analogy that I think about sometimes is like if you're like working at a restaurant, before you serve your food, you have to plate your food first, right? You gotta plate it first and then you serve it. Same thing with, kind of similar to Git, you have to stage your files before you could commit it, or AKA save it. And yeah, so once you've done that, once you've added everything to the staging environment that you want to commit, that's when you just commit your changes, and then Git will keep that like in a log, and they'll keep that saved. And then so at that point you have your saves on your local computer, right? Everything is saved on Git, you have a log of it. And now how do you get it to GitHub for other people to see or collaborate on? That's when you push everything onto GitHub. And like I said earlier, when you only have to initialize the repository once, so steps 2 through 4 is what you're gonna be rinsing and repeating every time you want to save new changes and push them onto GitHub. And here's a diagram to kind of illustrate that. So it starts from the left, right? The working directory, AKA your local repository, the folder you have on your computer. You add the files to the staging area or the staging environment first. And then once from there, you commit those files, and then they'll be committed locally with Git. And then if you want to put it remotely onto GitHub, that's when you push it from there. And with all that said, let's demonstrate. We're gonna show you guys a live example of what we're talking about. Okay, so, so yeah, we're gonna create a local Git repository and show you how to add files and like create a commit and all that. We will show you how to commit changes with like command line, and also like show you how to set up a GitHub repository. And if you're somebody who managed to like install Git on your machine and get a GitHub account already, then you can try and follow along. Like we said, we kind of designed this to be more of like a sit and watch kind of thing. So that's just completely optional. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So first up, okay, so let's say I want to make a new like folder that I want to save with Git, right? I need to make a local directory or local repository. So I would just make a new folder, and then I'll call this something like Git Workshop. Okay, cool. So we have a new folder called Git Workshop, and there's nothing in it. And let's say I want to start writing here. Let's just make a new text document called hello.txt. And we're gonna go ahead and open this with VS Code. You could use any text editor you want, but I'll just be using VS Code because it's cool. And so I'm just gonna open. Okay, yes. So I have my local folder made, right? And first I want to like work on my project, or in this case, just make an edit to this file. So I'll start by going like, hi, my name is Melvin. Okay, that's all the changes I wanted to do, right? So how do I save that with Git? How do I get started with that? So we mentioned earlier that you can access Git through a command line. You could do that with like just command prompt or like PowerShell or anything that you're familiar with. But for this showcase, I'll be using Git Bash, which is a shell or a command line interface that comes with Git. I think it's pretty handy and pretty convenient because it's kind of specifically made to work with Git. And you could open it. You could do right-click Git Bash here, and it'll just open it with this current folder, like the file path already opened. So I have the command line open in this directory, right? So how do I start? Remember what I said, you have to first initialize it. So the command to do that is just git init. And it says it's initialized, pretty simple. And you only have to do that once, like I said. And now I need to move the files that I changed into the staging area. So the command to do that is just git add, and then you choose what file you want. In this case, hello.txt. And then it doesn't say anything right now, but you could actually do git status to see what the status of the files you have. And you could see that it says changes to be committed. It's all green because it's already in the staging environment. And yeah, git status is really useful to just see like the status of your files and like all the which one's being committed, which one's been committed, which one's in the staging area and all that. And so from there, now we need to actually commit the change. And the command to do that on git is git commit. And you need to put this little like indicator -m, because remember what Rob said, you can associate a message with every commit that you do, and you can pretty much just explain like what changes you've done to your files. So in this case, I'll just say initial commit. This is my very first commit. So it's all committed, and now I have everything saved locally. Like Git has now saved all the work that I've done locally. So how do I put that onto the internet with GitHub? How do I connect my local repository to a remote one on GitHub? So let's just go onto GitHub's website after my computer's getting so slow. And this is what GitHub looks like. If you want to make a new repository, there's usually a button here, or you can go into like here, your repositories, and then new repository. And it's pretty simple. So I'm just gonna name this repository Git Workshop. And you can choose to make your repositories public or only private to you, or like whoever else you give access to. Personally, I think it's probably better to just make all your repositories public, unless you specifically like are working on something in secret. Because if you make it public, then other people are able to see what you're working on, and like maybe like recruiters might want to look at your GitHub profile and see what kind of code you're writing and see that you've been working on things and coding up. So I like to make all of them public. And that's all you really need to do. Just click create repository. And this is what an empty repository looks like. There's nothing in it. It's just been created on GitHub's website. And it gives you some steps on how to connect this GitHub repository with your local repository, which we'll be doing right now. So going back to the command line, right? I have everything committed. Now I need to connect this local repository with GitHub. There's a certain command for it, and you need to copy this link that GitHub provides, and you need to like paste that into your command line. So clicking this, I think I have it copied. And the command to do that is git remote add origin, and then you just paste that into there. And there we go. There's no message or anything, it's just connected. So you're connected everything. So now how do I put all my saves onto GitHub? And that's where pushing comes in. Git push origin main. And if you don't really know like what origin main means, we'll get more into that later once we talk about branching. But and obviously I'm not expecting you all to like memorize these commands. I just want to show you all like the general workflow and like the logic that goes behind using Git. Because once you know that, I think that's the most important thing. So let's push this. It's gonna load. And there we go. It's gonna give you a ton of messages. And as long as it doesn't say error or conflict or anything, then you're good to go. So it's been pushed onto GitHub. And now if we refresh the page, you'll see my hello.txt file that I made. It'll have the commit message right here that says initial commit. And you could go ahead and look and see, hi, my name is Melvin. So all the file that I just made locally is now there on the internet remotely. And that's kind of like the purpose of Git and GitHub, you know, to post it out onto there. And this is where you'll let like other people collaborate onto your project and all that. And there's a lot of different options and like menus you can look at on GitHub. And I'd say one of the most important ones, if you click right here, you can see all the commit history or like a timeline of your project from all the commits you've done. And you can see the initial commit that I made right there. And if I wanted to make like another change, just to show you all again the process, hello there. So I made my changes, go into terminal, and remember what I said, before I can commit anything, I first have to add it to the staging environment. Now it's been added. Now I have to commit it and add another message, second commit. So it's been committed locally. Now that now that the local one is already connected to the remote one, all we have to do from here is just git push. Okay, git push set upstream. Oh. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I know you might not know what that means, but we'll explain more once we get into branching. So now that it's pushed, you can see second commit. Now there's 2 commits on here. If I go into the file, you can see the change I just made locally is now on there remotely also. And going to the commit history, you can see both the commits that I've done. And that's kind of the main purpose of Git and GitHub. It's a pretty powerful tool to have that kind of log of all of the stages and commits that you've been through with your folder. It's how you'll save all your work. It's how you'll collaborate. And yeah, so that is like the very basic introduction to like how Git works and like the basic workflow of it. Let me see. And with everything that I've told you so far, that's like the bare minimum that you need to know to start using Git. You know, you can save your files and put it onto GitHub. But now we're gonna show you how do you actually collaborate with other people. And that's, you know, kind of the other most powerful thing about Git, collaborating with other people. So now we're gonna have Rob. I'm gonna add Rob as a collaborator, and he's gonna make his own changes and all that and push it. And we're gonna see how that works. So first up, I need to give Rob access to this repository to make it so that he can make changes to this. So in GitHub's website, you can go into settings, collaborators, password, and I can just add people right here. So what was your username, Rob?
You can just have my name and I'll show up.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, right here. So I could add him through his GitHub account. And then once I've invited him, he has to accept that like through his email.
Let me accept that really quick on my side. Sorry for all of you online. 1 second. So right now I'm just accepting the invitation. You don't really see that part because it's in my email. Now I'm gonna share my screen. So this is the repository that Melvin just made. So we're gonna go through the steps to getting a remote repository on GitHub onto your computer. So first you can copy the link at the top, and then let's see, I'll just open this, sorry, desktop. Okay, so first I'm going to do what is called cloning, which is basically just taking a repository on GitHub remotely onto your local computer. So in order to do that, you need to type in git clone, and then you paste the address of the GitHub repository link that you have access to. And then once I do that, so, oh, I put this in the wrong folder. gonna do that step again. Okay. So when you've cloned your GitHub repository, it'll show up in the folder that is specified in the command prompt that you're in on the left side over there, where you know how it says C users and then a number and then desktop. So in my actual desktop folder, this is the folder that was just cloned from that. So as you can see here, when you clone a Git repository, it'll initialize it for you. Remember that first step we talked about the Git workflow? When you clone from GitHub, it'll automatically initialize the folder as a Git folder. So you don't have to do that first step. So let's look inside. As you can see, there's the 2 changes that Melvin made earlier. And so let me open VS Code real quick. Ooh. Folder.
Yeah, and you can see already, just like right off the bat, we were able to pretty easily transfer the files I had on my computer onto Rob's computer. It was really simple with Git and GitHub, so that's one thing that they allow you to do.
Mm-hmm. And so let's say I want to add a new message to this text file. So let me just say, hello, Melvin. My name is Rob. And then we'll save that. And then what we'll do from there is in your terminal. So I changed this file, and now I need to save it on the local repository. So in order to do that, we need to add this file to the stage. Oh, let me first change my directory to the folder that I downloaded, Git workshop. Okay. And then we'll do git add hello.txt. And so there's not going to be like a confirmation message when you add it, but you can always double check which files have been modified and like added to the staging area by doing git status. So it says that I still need to commit this message. So first I do git commit, and then I write a commit message that'll say Rob's commit. And then it'll give you a confirmation message. And then once you've committed it, you need to push those changes by just typing git push. Looks like it's good. And then if you go back to GitHub on that repository, there you go. There's Rob's commit. This is the commit I just did. And if you look at the actual file itself, you can see my message.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you would do it over on somebody else's end. That's how the entire collaboration thing works with GitHub. You know, cloning the files, adding your own changes. Then you go through this process again, adding to stage, committing, and then pushing. And then that's how everybody would be working on the project all together. And you can see.
Should we demonstrate polling next?
Yeah. And you can see on my end now, there we go. I could see Rob's GitHub account, Rob's commit, and now there's 3 whole commits. I can see everything on my end too. So on GitHub, we can see Rob's message here. Hello, Melvin, my name is Rob. But on my actual folder that I have on my computer, I don't have it yet. So how do I get Rob's changes onto my actual computer? And that's where polling comes in. You know, just pushing, which you put it onto the remote, and then pulling, the opposite, you bring it back to your computer. And it should just be as simple as git pull. And there we go. So you can see 1 file changed, 3 insertions, 1 deletion. Now if I look back, now I have everything. I have all of Rob's changes and all that. And yeah, I think that covers all of the very basics of Git, like the bare minimum of what you need to know. So you all saw, like, we initialized the repositories, we staged it, we commit it, and then we push it. And then to collaborate, Rob needed to clone it and then go through this process with his own changes. And then now I can see everything and all that. And, you know, that's kind of the bare minimum of what you need to start collaborating and using Git and GitHub. But there's definitely a lot more you can still do. And one important concept that we want to talk about with you all is branching. So if you remember from what Rob said, branching is like making a kind of parallel version of your project. You can kind of think of it as like if you have a game project, right, and you want to add a new feature to your game project, you obviously don't want to put that into the final product yet until you actually know the feature's fully working, right? You want to flesh it out and make sure all the bugs are fixed, and you don't want to put it into the main actual product yet. You don't want to put it into the main branch yet. So that's where you would make a new branch, and anything you do in that branch will not affect the main default branch. You could do anything, make a ton of changes, commit a bunch of stuff, and it won't actually affect the main branch. It's like a parallel, different version of your file, of your project, that won't affect any other branches. So if I go into the terminal, you can see it says main right here. This right here says whatever branch you're on, and the default branch is either going to be named main or it might be named master. It depends on the version of Git you're using. They changed it from master to main for reasons that I won't be getting into. But yeah, there's a default branch. Mine is named main. And so if it's, from everything that I showed you all, I told you all that's the bare minimum of what you need. And you could technically just do your entire like project or whatever on the main branch. You technically don't have to make new branches. You could just keep pushing everything onto the final product, the main branch, and it'll work. Like, it's not going to give you an error or anything. But I think that's less than ideal, and it's not like the industry standard. People expect you to make branches whenever you want to make like changes or anything, and it keeps things more organized because you could like have a branch for a certain feature you're working on, another branch for a different feature, or like what I like to do it for like group projects. Like you might have a branch for like one person, like a Melvin branch. Everything that Melvin's working on goes on one branch, or like have a Rob branch, and like have everything Rob's working on another branch. So nothing actually affects the main final product. And we could, once we're done with everything, we're able to merge everything together, like combine everything and merge it all together. And that's kind of like the entire like main purpose of branches. And like I said, you technically could do a whole project with just the main branch. I'm actually guilty of that for a lot of my coding projects. We're kind of too lazy to make branches, so we just push everything onto main. But like I said, it's less than ideal, and you probably don't want to do that. So I'm going to show you all quickly, well, not quickly, but I'm going to show you all how to make a branch. It's not that complicated, and yeah. So right now we're on the main branch. So first, let's make a new branch. Let's just call it git branch. What should I name it? New underscore branch. So it made the branch, but you can see it still says main. So how do we switch to the branch? So git checkout new branch. And you can see right here, it changed from main to new branch. So right now I'm on the main branch, which is like a parallel version of the main branch. And you can see everything's still here from the main, that I got from the main branch. But if I make a change, right, this was made on the new branch. Okay, and then let's do git add hello.txt. Say I want to save this change. It'll be saved onto this new branch that I'm on. New branch. Okay, that's all nice and saved. It's all saved on the new branch. What happens if I go back onto the main branch, the branch that I was previously on? So git check out main. Switch back to main. Oops. And you can see the change is gone because everything that I did was on the other branch. It doesn't affect anything on main. So going back onto the new branch, everything comes back. This was made on the new branch. And so a branch, it could follow all this same workflow and like pipeline. How do I put this branch onto GitHub? Well, I have everything already added and saved and committed. So I could simply just do git push origin new branch. If you remember from earlier, before I did git push origin main, now I'm going to do git push origin new branch. So I push that, and you can see from all this, it says like new branch, it makes a new branch and all that. So if I go here onto GitHub, new branch had recent pushes less than a minute ago. If I click this, you can see there's a new branch. You see it has 4 commits and the new branch commit that I just did. And if I go onto the main branch, you can see the main branch is missing that because everything I did on new branch did not affect the main one. So there's that. That's kind of like the gist of branching. It lets you like have a parallel version, keeps things nice and organized, and it makes sure you don't break anything in the actual main branch. Because like I said, if you're like coding and you want to add a new feature, put it on a new branch and don't merge it with main branch until you know for sure it works. Because you don't want to be putting that into your final product without knowing that it works, right? So how do I actually merge everything? Oh, yes?
What happens if you do git push without saying new branch?
Like git push without saying origin new branch.
Yeah.
Let me think. I think git push. I think it would give you an error message saying like it needs like some kind of upstream or like remote version. But like if I tried right now testing git add. Oh, and if you saw I just typed -a, that's a shortcut to add every single file that you just changed into the staging environment automatically. It's just kind of muscle memory to me now to use -a. If I try git push, yeah, it says the current branch has an upstream branch or whatever. And if you could actually set the upstream. It says right there, set upstream, git push, set upstream, origin, new branch. So when you set the upstream, it sets your current local branch, right? Your local branch, new branch. It sets it to like track or sync up the remote branch that's on GitHub. In this case, it's also called new branch. Does that make sense? Like, so you have the local branch on your computer, right? It needs a remote branch to also like sync up and connect to. That's what setting the upstream does. And if you go into here, oh, it's so slow. There you go. New branch, and you can see there's a testing that I just did. I think once you set the upstream, like I just did right now with the set upstream command, you don't have to do it again. I'm pretty sure it's already tracking. But I just didn't mention that because I wanted to keep it a little bit more simple. But yeah, that's what happens. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, so we have this new branch with changes. Oh, yes? Oh, wait, yeah, okay. Okay, I think I'll just carry on for now. So you can see she had an error, and if you remember, I mentioned that we kind of designed this to be more of like a sit and watch kind of lecture or lesson than following along. It's because there is like a few extra steps you need to do to fully configure Git and GitHub, and it's not like hard, but it can be a little bit complicated if you're like new to doing stuff on terminal. So we felt like if we had everybody do that, it might have taken up too much time. But if we're done with the lesson, and oh, hello.
Hello.
Oh, hey, you arrived with the snacks.
I brought snacks. You have something to munch on when you listen to Melvin drone on and on.
Yep. Well, Josh is here and he brought snacks.
Oh yeah. And not just snacks. Yep, that's right. It's time for another round of What Did Josh Buy at Target this time? Oh baby, we got Mr. Bones. This is the prize for today. I'll let Mr. President decide how he wants to deal that out.
Let's think. What could be a good thing that's related to Git? How about if we have time, whoever's the first person to make a push to this repository that I just made, whoever's the first person that's able to do that, they'll win Mr. Bones right here.
But you have to wait until the end. We'll do a countdown. 3, 2,
Yeah,
1.
and like we said, we know we didn't have you all like set it up, but if we have time, which I think we will, then we can just go ahead and help you all with all that. but we just didn't want that to be like the first thing we do because that would just take up way too much time. And yeah, so where was I? So we have this new branch that I made. It's on GitHub, but main branch doesn't have all those changes that I just did on the new branch. So how do I actually merge two branches together? There's actually a few different ways to do that. One of the things about Git is that there's actually more than one way to do like one thing. You know, there's a lot of ways to do the same thing. I'll just go ahead and show you guys one way that I use most of the time. And so right now in the terminal, right, I'm on the new branch. If I do git checkout main, aka moving back to the main branch, you can see all the changes gone. So how do I actually like merge them? You could do, so now that everything is from the new branch is like pushed onto GitHub, right? It's all remotely on GitHub. I can do git pull origin new branch, and that will pull every change, every commit from this new branch on GitHub, and it'll merge everything together with whatever branch you're on, in this case main. So if I do that, there we go. It got all those changes that were on GitHub, and now they're on my local main branch. And what was I gonna say? Okay, well, now I pulled everything, and I have everything locally, right? Well, if you go onto GitHub, you can see it doesn't have those yet. So I need to push it onto the main branch of GitHub, right? I brought everything locally. Now I just have to put it onto the main branch. So just push it. Now that I've pulled everything from the new branch, I can just go ahead and push it back onto GitHub to have it on the main branch of GitHub as well. There we go. And you can see now the main branch also has everything that I did in the other branch. That's one way to merge everything. Just like go into whatever branch you want to merge things into, just pull it from the other branch, and then push it back onto GitHub. There's more than one way to do that. Like there's an actual git merge command that you can do, but this way works and there's no problems with it. So yes. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Does GitHub like an online storage?
Kinda, yeah. You actually have like, there's actually a limit on how much stuff you can store on GitHub, and you could get like GitHub Pro or GitHub Premium or whatever they call it to like buy more storage. But yeah, GitHub pretty much is like online storage for you to put everything.
And it's like a bash file that, manually updates.
Yeah, you could kind of think of it as a backup, yeah. Like if you lose everything locally, then as long as you put it onto GitHub, then it's gonna be there. You could always get it back. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, Git is really useful. GitHub is really useful. It like saves all your code. It backs it up for you. It has it on the internet for anybody to view it or collaborate with. And yeah. Okay, next thing. So here's like a little bit more on branching. Default branch is the main project. Like in this case, it was called main, but like I said, sometimes it might be called master. You could actually change it to whatever name you want, but I just have it main. You make a new branch when you want to add a new feature, and you want to make sure that feature works before you put it into the main branch. So that's where you make another branch. And branching keeps things nice and separated, like and organized. You ideally don't want to just be pushing everything onto main initially. You want to be making branches. And the next thing I want to talk about, a pull request. You might have heard that term before. It's kind of like the industry standard way to, how do I explain? To merge those branches together. Like I said, you know how I said there's more than one way to merge branches together. You guys saw that I just did git pull. The industry standard is to use a pull request. And I'll go ahead and show you all that right now. So, this is another change that's going to be merged with a pull request. So I made that change. Actually, I want to be doing that on the other branch, don't I? Let's see. git. So if I check out, okay, cool. So I'm on the new branch, right? And I made a change that's going to be merged with the pull request. So first, the usual process that I've outlined, add it to the staging environment, git add hello.txt, git commit pull request commit, and then now git push, and you see it worked. This kind of relates to the question that you asked, like with setting upstream and all that. You saw earlier I had to do git push origin. I had to specify origin new branch, right? But here I only had to do git push. I didn't have to specify that. It's because I did that set upstream thing, and it automatically like syncs this local branch with the remote branch called new branch, you know? I don't have to do origin new branch again, now that I've set that upstream thingy. That's kind of more of like an intermediate topic, but it's kind of worth mentioning, I guess. Does that make sense? Okay. So, new branch. It has the commit that I just did, the pull request commit. And you can see there's a big button here that says compare and pull request. That's how you're gonna make a pull request on GitHub. But you can also go into pull request, new pull request, and then right here. So you choose which branch you want to have the changes put into, merged into, and then you also choose what branch you want those changes to come from, right? So in this case, there's a new branch. It says able to merge. It shows all the changes that I just did. And let's click create pull request. And you can leave a comment for the pull request. I guess you could kind of think of a pull request as like you are requesting the changes in this branch to be put into the main branch. You gotta request it, because like the reason why it's an industry standard is because if you're a senior dev, you obviously don't want junior devs to just be able to push everything like onto main whenever they want, right? You gotta check it first and make sure what they're doing won't break everything. That's what a pull request is for. Like the junior devs or whatever would make a pull request, and then the senior devs would like review it and read everything and make sure everything's okay to be merged. And then it doesn't get merged until the pull request gets accepted. That's the industry standard. That's probably what you're gonna be doing if you're like working a programming job. And yeah. So let's create this pull request. Okay, first up, the pull request has been made. Let's say the junior dev just like made that pull request. Now I'm the senior dev. I see there's a pull request. Somebody is requesting to have their changes merged with main. I go into here, pull request commit, and it requires approval from specific reviewers before merging. Like, well, yeah, that's kind of like the point of a pull request, you know. So here's a pull request. I can see all the files changes. I can see all the commits in this pull request. It's an open pull request because I haven't accepted it yet. And GitHub has no conflicts and all that. It looks good. There's no conflicts. It doesn't look like this code will break anything. I can say, okay, this is good to merge. So I just say merge pull request, confirm merge. And there we go. Pull request successfully merged and closed. And it gives you a prompt saying you're free to delete that branch now that the changes are like saved onto the other branch. For me personally, I don't really like deleting the branch. I like just keeping it there, you know, just for the sake of having it. So let's not do that. And you can see merge pull request. Now the main branch has this pull request commit, and that's kind of another way to merge the changes together from one branch to another. It's using pull requests, and I'd say you definitely want to get familiar with that way because, like I said, it's kind of what you'll be expected to do. You know, if you have an actual programming job, you're not going to be allowed to just push everything whenever you want or merge everything whenever you want. You're going to have to make a pull request. And yeah, does that make sense? Okay, cool. In that case, I think that covers pretty much everything in terms of the live demo. there's a few more things we wanted to discuss with you relating to Git and GitHub. Okay, there's some other tips or tricks that go into like that you can do with Git, because like I said, there's a lot of things you can do with Git. First up, so I already explained to you that like you can merge changes together, right? From one branch to another. You're probably wondering how that works. One of the powerful things about Git and GitHub is when you make a commit, and like you merge them together, it's not like completely overriding one branch with like everything. It's not just deleting everything in one branch and overriding it with like the other branch, you know? Git actually tracks and it's able to identify it saves the changes you made. It doesn't save like the whole thing. Git saves the changes you make. And it's able to distinguish between like a deletion or like when you type something new or like when you replace something or like move a file or all that. Git is able to distinguish between all those. And then it just applies those changes onto the new branch, you know. That's one of the powerful things about Git. But you're probably wondering, what happens if two people edit the exact same thing and then you try and merge them together? That is one of the biggest headaches of Git, and like it's kind of like what makes Git complicated. Merge conflicts. When two people try and edit the same thing, try and merge it together, you get an error called a merge conflict, and that's the biggest thing that like makes Git complicated, and it's like the biggest problem that people run into. So let's demonstrate that. Let's get a merge conflict on purpose to show you all. Okay, did you want to help me out with this, Rob, or should I just do it on my own?
You start by doing it first, and then I'll go edit it, right?
Okay, yeah. Okay. Let's see. So, actually, go ahead and pull everything that I did.
So, am I still sharing my screen? Okay, cool.
Oh, okay.
So, if you go and look at my screen, I'm going to first pull all of the changes that Melvin has done over the workshop. So, first, okay. So if I go and check, there's all of Melvin's changes. And in VS Code, it actually shows you like the latest commit, which is very nice.
Okay. So, like, what happens if Rob tries, like, deleting my name in the first line and just replacing it with something else? Okay, cool. Now, like, go ahead and commit and, like, push all that.
So, go through the process again. First, modify the file. So first, add it to the stage. Git add hello with commit /m. The first line is now Rob's name. Then once I commit, I'm going to push those changes.
Okay, cool. So, Rob's made his changes. Now that he's pushed them, I could go ahead and see them on GitHub on my screen. First line is now Rob's name. Okay, you can see right here, Rob. So what if I change this exact same thing that Rob did locally? Like Rob did that, and it's on the remote repository. What if I change it locally and I try and merge everything together? Let's just do Gitbum. Hi, my name is Gitbum. Okay, git add hello.txt, git commit.
Oh wait, you're in separate branches, aren't you?
Oh shoot,
Oh, yeah.
you're right. Git checkout.
No, that's just the Git batch. It's just the terminal that comes with
Major changes.
Git when you
for
download
stash.
it.
Oh boy.
Does it change the first line?
Git stash. I could do that. Git checkout. Git stash. That worked. Uh-oh.
That worked.
Yeah, I guess it works. Yeah. Oh yeah, it worked. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. That was something I forgot. So, I made my change. Rob's got his change. What happens if we try and merge them together when we edited the exact same thing? Yeah, to main. Okay, first off, what if I try and push what I have? What happens? It's gonna give me an error because before you can push, if there was any changes made to the branch that you're trying to push to, you have to pull those changes first. You have to make sure you're in sync with whatever is on the remote repository before you're able to actually add anything. Because you can't just add stuff without first being up to date with whatever is online, right? So it gave me an error there. It doesn't let me push. So I need to pull Rob's changes. But how am I gonna pull it? What happens if I pull it and merge it together when Rob already made a change on the exact same thing as me? And there we go. It says conflict, merge failed, and now it says you're merging, and now you have a really big headache because it's now VS Code. Well, I'll get to that later, but yeah, it's now trying to merge two different changes on the exact same thing together, and that's what a merge conflict is. So that's why I said you probably don't want to. A general rule of thumb is like you don't want to be working on the exact same thing with another person, or else you're probably going to run into a lot of these merge conflicts, and it can be a huge pain to fix if you have a lot of them. Even just one could be a huge pain to fix if you don't know what you're doing. But luckily, VS Code and probably a lot of other IDEs too, they have built-in tools to help you resolve these merge conflicts. So I'm going to attempt to resolve this, and hopefully it goes smoothly. So you can see it has this one. My name is Gitbum. My name is now Rob. It's telling me that this is the current change, and this is a change I'm trying to merge into it. You see, VS Code has this handy button here that says Resolve in Merge Editor. VS Code actually lets you see the two different versions that you're trying to merge together, and it lets you manually choose which one you want to accept. So in this case, my name is Gitbum, so I want to accept current. There we go. So this is the end result. Now I can do complete merge. And I don't know if this will work. Oh, okay, it worked. There we go. So if I do git status, now it doesn't say merging here anymore. That's because I resolved everything using VS Code. There's probably a way to do it with just terminal, but personally I actually don't know how to do that. I'd say VS Code can come really handy for these kinds of things, or like any other IDE, because they have those built-in tools to let you resolve them like through their application. So now I can do git push, and now it works because I resolved that merge conflict. Let's see what happened on GitHub. You see, it has the merge, and if I look at the commits, there's the Gitbum commit, and it also has Rob's commit too. But yeah, so that's kind of, we just wanted to illustrate you all like what a merge conflict is, because if you're not careful, you'll probably run into a lot of those. And branching, like I mentioned earlier, that you can technically just do everything onto the main branch without ever making a new branch, and that will work. But if you actually make different branches, it'll help you avoid these. It'll help keep everything organized, and because if everybody tries to push onto main at the same time on the same thing, it's gonna get messy, and at some point you'll probably run into a merge conflict. So that's why you want to keep things organized with other branches. So yeah, that's one thing we wanted to demonstrate to you all, what a merge conflict is. Like I said, can be resolved with like VS Code or other IDEs. There's probably a way to do it with just a terminal, but personally, I'm not sure how to do that myself. And yeah, so let's like talk about using Git with like game projects. So if you're using Unity, something you want to keep in mind is you probably don't want to work on the same scene as other people. Because like what I just said, if you're both trying to edit the same scene and then you both try and merge those changes, you're going to get a merge conflict 100%. That's really annoying. So when working in Unity, you generally want to make a new scene and then work from there. You could just copy everything from that one scene onto the new scene, right? And then just work from there. Just make sure you're not working on the same scene with Unity, because you're probably going to be getting a merge conflict. That's one thing to know. And yes, and some other things you can do with Git is you can like revert back to a previous version that you've already saved. That's one of the powerful things about Git. Like, let's say you made a bunch of changes, you committed everything, and you realize everything I'm doing will not work. I'm just gonna abort everything. So you could jump back to a previous version that you committed previously and just work from there, you know. That's one thing you can do with Git. And another thing you can do with Git, like if you have multiple branches, you can get like a specific file from another branch, you know. Like if you only need one specific change from another branch instead of everything, you could do that too. That's another thing you could do with Git. And yeah, anything else you want to add, Rob?
No, I think you hit most of it.
Okay. In that case, here's some other resources. Like, we'll be posting these slides, by the way. Like, this is a website that has like visual interactive Git exercises for you to get more familiar with it. Kind of looks like a video game almost. And yeah, and here's the link to the official documentation for Git commands. Definitely read up on it and know all the concepts, because like I said, if you can understand all the concepts and like the fundamentals of Git, then that's more important than just memorizing the commands. It's better to know the foundations and know when you need to use a command than it is to like just memorize the commands and not actually know what the commands do, you know? Actually, yeah. So, and another thing, Git, you saw everything I did today, I did it on the command line, right? And you can there's actually a lot of applications or like plugins that facilitates these commands for you, and it does it all for you, like at the push of a button. Like the most popular one I'd say is probably GitHub Desktop. It's like an application made by GitHub that you can download, and instead of doing all those terminal commands and like pushing for polling and all that, you could just do all that at the click of a button. It's a lot simpler and easier. And VS Code also has something like that. Let me show you all. VS Code is actually pretty useful for Git stuff, as I mentioned earlier. Here's source control. You can see here's a big commit button. It's grayed out because I don't have any changes or anything. You could push, pull, clone with VS Code. It does all this stuff automatically. And so that's a really useful thing. There's a lot of resources out there. Yeah.
There's also a built-in terminal on VS Code. If you go into VS Code and click terminal on the top here, you can actually just do all of the Git commands in the directory that you need to do it in already. Like when you open the terminal in VS Code, whatever file or folder that you're working in, it'll automatically open a terminal to that folder, so you don't have to change the directories when you set up. And it's also built into the application, so you don't have to change Windows to do a new terminal. It's very nice, so I highly recommend using VS Code.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do terminal through VS Code, or you can use these big buttons here to do it for you instead. Pretty powerful. So there are those resources out there. But personally, if you know me or have worked with me in like a coding project, I'm a big advocate for sticking with command line and like learning how to do that from the start. Because I think like if you're gonna learn Git, you like the most complicated thing is probably learning the fundamentals. And once you know that, like that's the most important thing. I think sticking with command line from the beginning will teach you that, like those steps, and all the fundamentals and like the workflow. Sticking with command line will teach you all that better than just clicking a button to do it for you, you know? I think most places expect you to actually like genuinely know how to use Git yourself on the command line rather than just pressing a button. I think it's better to just learn command line from the start, and sticking with that and getting familiar with that, than it is to like right off the bat use GitHub Desktop. I think it's more important to learn everything yourself. And also, not to mention, it looks a lot cooler when you're typing in the terminal. You look like a hacker rather than just somebody who just presses a button on GitHub Desktop. But now I'm just, rambling.
Okay, Grandpa.
Yeah, okay. And yeah. So those do exist. So that's something we wanted you all to keep in mind. And there's a lot of cheat sheets out there too. Like if you have trouble remembering all the commands, there's like a lot of cheat sheets out there that like just have it all lined out for you and explain what they do. I'll be posting this afterwards too. There's a lot of different versions out there. So that's another thing. Also, before we conclude everything, rest in peace, our old Git king. His name is Enzo. He was a previous vice president. You could view his old Git workshop here. He's retired, deceased, all that. Now we're the new Git kings. We've dethroned him and we're taking his place. And yeah, he's gone but never forgotten. We're taking his job now. So rest in peace, Enzo. And yeah, thanks for listening. There's a sign in QR code. And like I said, now we have like a whole hour, I think, almost a whole hour. So if you wanted to try and do like configure Git on your own, we'll stay here until like 5 o'clock to help you out with that. And the first person who's able to—
I have a better idea, Mr. President. Well, actually, this is Sam's idea.
Oh, sure.
So we're gonna help you all, get your Git stuff set up. And what we want you to do is we want you to post your best joke in the GitHub repository. And we'll go ahead and review them and see which one we like the most, and we'll declare the winner next meeting. And the winner gets to take home Mr. Bones over here.
Okay, cool. In that case, yeah, I like that idea. So if you want to like pull out your laptop and get Git all set up, then you can go ahead and do that, and we'll be here to help you all out. But in terms of the actual like workshop and like the lesson we wanted to give you all, that's all done. So if you needed to leave or like you don't want to stick around to like configure all that right now, then you're free to go. And thank you all for joining us. I hope this really helped you all out, because Git is a really powerful tool that you'll be using really often in any kind of programming project. And it can definitely be complicated, but we just wanted to show you all like the very basics and just get you familiar with like the workflow and what Git is capable of, because I think that's probably the most important thing at the very beginning. And yeah, you're all free to go. Thank you all.